Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the 7th season of Consider This. This is the first show of the year and we are quite excited to be back here at the Milo Bales Student Center at UNO. My guest this week I'm also excited about. They are with the Nebraska Taxpayers Association and they are very busy people. There are 2 petitions out there awaiting your signature if you so desire to sign them. My guests this week are Dick Benchin, who is with the Nebraska Taxpayers Association. He's heading up this petition drive. Also Deanne Welch with the Nebraska Taxpayers Association. Welcome. I think that we need to do a lot of explaining. This is going to be one of those explaining kinds of shows. But I think the bottom line is that over the past several years, a number of people and groups have been very concerned about the eroding power of what has been dubbed the second house of the Nebraska legislature, and that's the people. And so there are a couple of issues that have really been thorns in the side of people who want that second house to retain its power.
Yes. The people have always been considered the second house of the legislature when we've had one house. The petition process was what created our one house legislature. And so we've moved beyond that because the people were tricked in 1988 to voting for an amendment to change the Constitution, which actually ended up doubling the number of signatures required to put petitions on the ballot. It unfortunately, what the people voted for was to make it that you have to be a registered voter to sign a petition. Well, that was state law, and everybody thought that was just fine. But subsequent Supreme Court ruling had changed that and had said, well, what the people actually voted on was an amendment to double the number of signatures that is required.
Let's say that before it was electors, and which means the people, X number percentage of people that voted in a given election. Then we people passed on a referendum a bill that amended the Constitution to say a percentage of registered voters. Well, excuse me, as we all know, there are always more registered voters than there are, I think there's a train coming through here, than there are people who actually vote. And it almost doubled the people, as you mentioned, that required to sign petitions. And as a result, and we've seen this across the country, most recently in California, which is a totally different thing, it's their recall process. But they had a large number, about 50% of paid petition circulators. And so that takes it even more out of the realm, you say, of the people, because it is so much more difficult to do.
Yeah, right now, petition processes, to run a petition, you basically, to get that many signatures, to get people to volunteer, it's very difficult. So what anybody that's run a petition in the last few years usually uses paid petitioners. It costs a lot of money. So unfortunately, many of the petitions that have been ran in the last few years have a monetary value to some of the petitions that have been ran. So if you're running a volunteer petition, there's only been one ran since this has been doubled. It's been successful to get on the ballot. And they had a full-time paid staff also. So they didn't pay the circulators, but they did have a staff that was paid.
When you have an interest behind, let's take, Deanne, the recent, and it's still up in the air as to whether it'll ever get on a ballot, but the one for gambling.
Yes.
That is now in the hands of the state Supreme Court to decide if it violated, and this is another issue you're dealing with, the one subject rule. But at any rate, there was a vested commercial interest in that. So it was probably relatively easy for them to get paid signatures, or pay for signatures, or pay for people to obtain signatures, because the gambling industry has a few bucks.
Correct.
But for those issues that are a little more, we would like to think a little more pure of their commercial value that affect the voters, people can't afford that necessarily.
Yes. Keeping the single subject rule, keeping the gambling initiative off the ballot last year has remained troublesome for me, because I recall back in 1998 when Initiative 413, that was the measure brought by the businessmen to put a constitutional limit on the growth of taxes. That was challenged as well. Do you recall that? And the Nebraska Supreme Court said it was premature, that you actually had to pass the Constitution before it could be judged the amendment before it could be judged unconstitutional. Then the teachers group, I believe it was, brought a similar suit into the Lancaster District Court in Lancaster County, and that same court that rejected, by saying it's premature, rejected a challenge in 1998, turned around in 2002 and accepted the challenge, and then did keep it off the court.
So you're talking about the single. I'm trying to keep
The single subject rule.
I'm trying to talk about just the cost of petitions right now, and how doubling the size. We'll get to more to the single. I'm trying to not confuse everybody, but the thing is that one of your petition drives contains both the elements.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's naturally confusing by its nature.
Yeah.
It contains to lower the percent, change the wording from registered voters to electors. And I think, what is it? A regular petition is 7%. The number will remain the same, and a constitutional amendment is 10%.
That's right.
But just by changing from registered voters to electors, which you want to do and are asking that issue be put on the ballot, that would nearly half the number of signatures required. And then also in there,
The single subject rule, that's in the same petition.
Right.
It's two separate constitutional amendments.
Is this going to pass the single subject rule?
It's two separate constitutional amendments that eroded our power of initiative. The first one came in 1988, and that was the one that changed the language from electors to registered voters. The second one was the single subject rule, and that came in 1998. Both of those those amendments would be repealed. In other words, the language from 1920 during the Constitutional Convention,
it would
there was
revert
an
back.
amendment. We would revert back to the original language. Both of those appear in one petition.
We feel that the way we're doing it, we're not having returning of the signatures back or removal of the single subject as the subject of the petition. The subject of the petition is to return the language to the way the Constitution was written in 1987. So that was.
So you're
before,
sliding. You're pretty sure you're sliding under
there's
the door on that.
Before any changes have been made.
And that's your single subject
and that's
in your
the
mind.
single subject in our mind.
We are doing everything we need to do in this proposal to
Yes.
change it back to what was passed in
Yeah.
one fell swoop.
Yes.
The lower court ruling that throughout the gambling petition had stated that the petition subject had to be natural and necessary. Well, these two are right in the same paragraph in the Constitution, so it's natural.
Well, there's certainly in your logic that they're natural and necessary to revert back to the
yeah.
original Constitutional Convention's
Yes.
interest.
But now, if I may restate
Now, go
my
ahead.
issue before, this problem was acknowledged as being a problem back in 1998. But yet the same court, the Lancaster District Court, the same court refused to hear it at that time, but did accept it at this time, and then ultimately, as we know, in 2002, the gambling initiative was kept off the ballot. Now, whether or not you would have voted for the gambling initiative is not the issue. The issue is, do we have a legitimate power of initiative in this state? And I'm suggesting that we don't, because we can't anticipate what the court is going to do. It defies logic for the same court to rule in opposite ways only 4 years apart.
Now, there are a couple of items when I was reading up on this, information from your website and a couple of other places too, is that the Attorney General does have the power anyway to divide.
Yes.
So if we signed a petition and he thought it was best to meet constitutional requirements, or just meet maybe a sense of things, that he could divide some issues up.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is a possibility, if it seems unwieldy,
Yeah.
that it can be done. Now
Yes,
that
it
could
can.
get into a political fray too,
Oh.
but she has that power. And the other thing that is interesting is that the other house of the legislature, the ones who are elected, the unicameral, can put as many things in
Yes.
a piece of legislation. They don't vie with Washington on how our federal legislators stuff things into legislation.
Actually, they are limited to a single subject law also.
But it does often contain.
Yeah, several years ago, they put an Amendment 3 on the ballot. It had 3 sections, changes to the Constitution to the petition process. We opposed that. 2 out of 3 were defeated. They were all put in as a one bill, but they appeared on the ballot in 3 different questions on the ballot. So it can be split, but they passed as one bill as one single subject. So by their single subject rule, we believe we're safe.
Okay, so what's good for the goose, you say, is good for the gander.
Yes,
So
We're
it
not
is.
sure, but that's
Yeah.
what we
I don't know
want
which
to
one
do.
you are, but
That's what we want to fix up in our Constitution.
just to have say that, you know, if it's fair for one, it's fair for the other.
Yes, it is.
Okay, now you have this other thing, and this is a petition that I'm to give the voters an opportunity to approve any tax increases. Now, that's a pretty broad statement, so help me out on exactly what you want to accomplish with this. There are lots of lawmakers in this state. Is this just the state lawmakers? Is this local lawmakers? Give me a feel for it.
We have no desire to impede the power to tax. We're only seeking review by the people. The people know what they want to be taxed for. We don't believe that the people would say, I don't want to be taxed for anything. Public schools, for example, they are required by our state constitution. The people know they have to pay for public education, and the educators seem more fearful of this constitutional amendment than almost anyone. We believe that if the legislature, if the local governing bodies wanted a particular project, they should court the voters and tell them how much it's going to cost and what they want the money for, rather than just arbitrarily raising taxes and then later using the money at their own discretion.
Well, let's take the last few years of the legislature as an example. They have increased taxes on already existing taxes, let's say cigarettes, alcohol, some other things. Would each one of those have to be, if your item passed, each one of those have to be voted on individually?
Yes.
But that could get
Well, if they wish, they can put it on the ballot as a package. We don't have any definition on how it's placed on the ballot. It just has to be placed on the ballot. If they put it on a package, then it can be voted on as an individual or as a group. That would be up to the legislature or the local body.
Okay, here's my concern. If I say I don't want my taxes raised without my permission, or at least the permission of the aggregate electorate, but they pass budgets, generally most governmental subdivisions. The mill levy has to be set midsummer, late summer, somewhere in there. And so we don't necessarily have elections scheduled. Would that require special elections?
It may, if they choose to require a special election. They may have to do a little different about how the government is run. They're going to have to plan a little farther ahead. We can't have the last minute budgeting or budgets appearing 2 months after actually the budget year starts. There's going to have to be some planning done by the government.
What about financial emergencies? What about tornadoes? I mean, I lived here in 1975. You guys were probably around at least.
When you
know what can happen.
When you have tornadoes, you usually have federal government coming in for assistance. Usually, at the state level comes in. Each government agency now have reserve funds. They have all created reserve funds. They never like to use it. They always seem to make it bigger and bigger. But emergencies like that is what the reserve funds are for.
So, how's it going? You're out there and you've gathered what, a couple thousand? How many? Right now, with the current law, how many signatures do you need on each one of those 2 petitions?
We are estimating that we need about 120,000 to accommodate any errors or any
Okay,
duplications.
but what does the law first require that you would
Well,
have in
it
terms of valid
requires
signatures?
10% of registered voters, so it's going to be about 105,000.
Okay, and you're going to go for a pad, naturally, which common sense petition circulators would do. And you have to have this done. I know there's a window that you have to meet.
By the end of June 2004, we have to have the number of signatures required distributed constitutionally statewide. We turn them in at the Secretary of State's office
And this is for the fall election. In other words, the
for
presidential
November of
election.
2001.
And that usually draws a few people. So
One thing I'd like to point out about these petitions, right now they're just ideas. We've just like a bill being introduced into the legislature. This is the first round of debate. We can't proceed beyond that unless we get 120,000 people agreeing with us that this is an idea that they wish to debate. So right now it's just an idea. If we can get 120,000 people that agree with us, we can go into the next round of debate and decide if people can decide if they want to make it a law or not.
you're carrying on that analogy of how laws are actually passed.
Yes.
You know, it has to get first round approval.
We
Except
are the
you'd only
second
need
house.
2 rounds of
Yeah,
approval on
we
this
only
one. You would
need
need
2
3,
rounds.
as in the unicameral. But they're tough rounds.
Yes.
Petitions, the history of, you know, we look at California and we're amused. I mean, they put on a good show. Those Californians, no matter what they do, they know how to produce a good show. And we've looked at that, and as I said earlier, that was not an initiative petition issue. It was a recall. It has to do with their laws on recall.
Yeah.
So it's apples and oranges to say, oh, look at what they can do with their petition drive, and to say this could happen to us. So that was a recall
Correct.
portion under their constitution. But at any rate, we saw that people kind of went crazy. Maybe they needed to get it on the ballot. Maybe they needed to bring it up for discussion. But it appears everything's crazier in California. So let's cut it down several notches and imagine that we were going to have petitions all the time. You made it easier. Let's say this passed, and you made it easier, and as you would say, fairer.
Yeah.
To get it on the ballot, and that we would have just petition drives right and left, and we don't really though have a history, even when it was easier,
Yeah,
of going willy-nilly.
That's correct. Most initiatives that have been tried have not made it to the ballot. Even those that have made it to the ballot, they're just as likely not to pass as they are to be accepted.
Only a third of petitions that have made it to the ballot have been approved by the voters.
And we're not talking hundreds. We're talking, what, 50, 60?
Oh, you know, we've had the petition process in the state for 80-some years, 90-some years, since 1913.
Since 1912. 1912 it was adopted in the Constitution.
90-some years here.
There's only
And
like 5 dozen or so that
no,
have actually
we're
gone.
probably close to 100 over the years.
That have been on the ballot?
That have been on the ballot.
Okay.
And that includes, you know, amendments to the Constitution, and legislatures amend our bills, and then referendums also.
So, but still, that's about 11 a year. I mean, a decade.
Yeah.
So that's, again, not willy-nilly. That's about 1 a year.
Yes.
You know, in an average year. So you want to get this passed. What has been the, you know, you're doing a lot of legwork. I mean, Deanne comes into the Student Center here at UNO, and she's got her petitions that she's off getting. I know how hard it is. You don't miss an opportunity.
Right.
How are you doing? I know you don't want to get real exact.
I am actually serving in an official capacity as the distributor. We have 1,032 sets. That's one of each petition on the street now. We have probably, now I'm guessing here, but we probably have 200 separate volunteers who have these petitions assigned to them. We need help. This is a volunteer effort, and we are hoping that people watching your program today will contact our organization. Even if they only take 1 set, everybody knows 20 people. Everybody knows 20 relatives and friends. All they need to do is witness the signature, take it to a notary public, have the notary witness that they are attesting to the fact that they had witnessed the signature, and return it to our organization. It's that simple. If you believe in the issue, contact us. You can help. Everybody can help to make a difference and to make this a success.
What if I believed in one and not the other?
That's fine too.
You
We
could-
believe in
yeah.
both.
I could take one?
Yes, you
Yes,
can.
you could.
So you're not making it an all or nothing proposition
That's
just to get
absolutely
it
correct.
to get them on the
We,
ballot.
You
we
know-
have some will sign one and the other, or vice versa, and that's fine. It's you know.
But people want to be paid now. That's become the gold standard,
Yeah.
and that's part of
We don't have any money
what you
to
think is the
pay.
problem.
We don't have any money to pay. We are getting donations. People are sending in money, but we're using that for our expenses. And eventually, when we get the signatures required, we're going to have advertising money, because we know that people who are fearful of direct democracy are going to then come forward. When they see that there's a danger of this being placed on the ballot, they will come forward. And we're going to have advertising money to counteract that. We understand that.
What if I were a cautious person and I said that, yeah, I'd like to have a little more power. I often feel powerless. And certainly in this society we do, just because of the complexities and how, how we've become exact, and you work this widget and you work that widget and you're in charge of this, and so we're not as broad and general of people as we were before in our professions, and everything else seems out of our control, even our jobs sometimes. But anyway, so I want to take back some of my power in the government, but I'm also a conservative. I'm not talking politically, but I'm a little conservative on looking at, I elected these people, we should maybe get more involved in elections, because part of the problem is that our voter turnout is so low. Maybe we should leave it in the hands of the legislators and then dog them to no end. Is this an admission that doesn't work, that we can't do that? That we have no pressure and we don't exert the pressure that we could?
I have been trying to dog the legislators.
Well, I know you do, but I mean...
And I don't believe it works. I believe that they will respond to special interests, and they will not respond to individuals. And I have even brought to them constitutional issues, and they haven't denied my interpretation of the Constitution. They just shrugged it off and said, you're the only one that cares, and so we're not going to abide by that provision.
Do you believe that special interests, oftentimes of a more commercial nature, not always, but Thomas Jefferson was fearful of the corporations, and I'm not making this an anti-corporation or an anti-capitalistic thing, but
it's not always corporations that do the special interest there.
But let's say gambling, which I might sign it because I believe in having the option to gamble, but we do know that there was an influence, certainly in dollars, from an industry. That doesn't make them bad people.
No. Then the fact that they would have made money if it would have passed, or it can still pass possibly.
But lobbyists, we're concerned a lot about lobbyists, that they're almost the second house of the legislature.
See, that's one of the differences in Nebraska than the 40 other 9 states. In the legislature, we only have that one house, and we only have 49 people elected there. They're representing 1.5 million people. Well, that's not a lot of people to represent 1.5 million, and it's hard for people to get down to Lincoln. I mean, everybody's got a job. We can't get down to Lincoln. We can't be watching them constantly. And then you go into all the other government agencies we have created. When in the 1800s, when governments were formed, we started out with county government, city government, and the state government. Well, now we've got school boards, we've got NRD boards, we've got utility boards. And you can't watch all those. We can try, but we can't go to every board meeting. We can't put the pressure on to every board meeting. And so we need a checks and balance. And that's what this petition is about, is to give the people a checks and balance over those elected officials.
And so you feel that you can educate people to come to your point of view, that this time has come to right this sort of wrong, as you see it, in terms of changing the requirements?
I believe that if the legislature comes back in January and raises taxes for a 3rd year in a row, that the people will seek us out. That's what I believe.
But you'd like to get a few petition signatures before then, wouldn't you?
We are, and we,
we should feel a lot better.
Well, we're we started this petition process way earlier than most petitions. Most petitions don't start until after.
Start in January or February.
January and February. We started early. We set up the basis. We've got the petitions printed. We've got them ready to go across the state. We've got them spread out across the state. We still need more people. People are signing the petition, but we need more people willing to circulate. We need more people in the streets. It's not an easy job, but if you want to do something, you got to stand up. You can't wait for the other person to do it. You have to get out and do it yourself.
One of the things that kind of concerns me, again, as someone that that at heart would want to vote for the voting on any tax increase, is that we do have all these governmental subdivisions, and I just wonder if, if they want to raise the mill levy, just to cover for inflation. Say the taxes or the property tax base is shrinking, or the property values have gone down, and they want to, which could happen if the economy, and it won't, but let's just say that we're real positive. But you know what I'm saying? That something was a function of not really bad spending or wanting to spend more, but it was just a matter of keeping perhaps what are state constitutionally mandated services, and these are the schools.
I don't have any difficulty at all understanding what the Constitution requires, and I know I can only speak for myself, but when I go to the polls, I vote for issues, I vote for people who I believe will uphold the Constitution. And I can only assume that everyone else is doing.
Do you think,
likewise.
When you go to the polls, Deanne, or Dick, just as an example, would you vote down every tax increase?
No.
I think there's a concern that every tax increase will be defeated out of hand. Like many school bond issues are happening in areas where the population growth has been huge. And people of wealth in the community are transferring their kids to the next district under the state transfer law, and some of these rather complicated dynamics.
Well, people don't always vote. In Burwell, just this couple weeks ago, they
Home
voted.
of one of the greatest rodeos.
They voted for a half-cent sales tax increase for economic development. So people will vote for tax increases if it's presented to them to the way they want it. Now, some people
you can make the case.
Yeah. If some people may not like that vote, but it went to a vote of the people, and the majority decided it.
Okay.
And we do believe that our constitutional amendment will cause the elected official to make the case. They'll have to court the voters. Instead of just blatantly saying, I have the power and this is what I'm going to do, they're going to have to explain it to the people and court their vote. But I do believe that people will vote for tax increases if they know what it's for.
Okay, we've got to wrap up. I do want to mention that folks can find out more about you at nebraskataxpayers.com. That's the website for the Nebraska Taxpayers Association. And I want to mention that your organization is not fly-by-night. It's been around for more than 2 decades, and of course, longtime tax activist Ed Jaksha was in on the ground of that, and you guys have been with it for a long time. So I just want to thank you, Dick Benchin with Nebraska Taxpayers Association, Deanne Welch. The time goes fast, but at least people have a taste now for what you're all about if they didn't before. I want to thank you for being on a premiere show for this big 7th season, and we want to thank you folks for being with us and sticking with us all this time. See you next week.
To view this edition of Consider This or past programs, visit our website at unotv.unomaha.edu. For comments or questions, call 402-554-2516 during regular business hours. Consider This is a production of UNO Television.